Evening settled over the frontier town like a hell breath, long and cautious, dust suspended in the air as though it were afraid to touch the ground. The sun slipped behind uneven rooftops, bleeding out slowly, staining the windows with theodol red of old rust. A lone lantern rocketed outside the saloon, its chain complainings fly, the light weary from telling theism stories night after night. Horse shifted against their ties, would side beneath passing boots, and somewhere a harmonica worked at forgetting a tune I had once known. It was the kind of hour that invited memory without permission, close enough to brush your shoulder, quiet, enough to hurt, nothing hurried. Mercy felt like something that had been set down in the wrong place and never retrieved. He sat on a bench outside the saloon, hate pulled low, shoulders shaped by years of flavor and the slow erosion of loss. At 35, his face already bore teaching of weather and regret. Once these towns spoke his name with approval, then it spoke it carefully. Now, it didn't speak, eat at all. The ranch that once fixed his days in place was gone, traded away through murmurs and inked documents. Rumor moved in where truth's holder stayed. He did not contest it. Silence had become the last thing that still belonged to him, and he protected it with the same care he had once given the land, before fences failed and neighbors learned it how to. Look past him, inside him remained a man, still trying to be decent, even though no one required it of him anymore. He rose before dawn, out of habit, slept lightly from guilt, and kept this word scarce because language had unseasoned on him. Men crossed. The street rather thun-nod. Saloon keepers poured his drink last, their eyes measured. A preacher dipped his head and moved on. None of them cared full truth, but each held a fragment shard enough to draw blood. Loneliness did not scream. It leaned inward, constant and deliberate, waiting. Like soil lacked in winter, it packed itself a rendezvous, unspoken hope and rejected. Warmth even when spring promised it would return. He remembered something small from years ago, though it came to him in pieces. A boy and the trail, blood soaking his sleeve, fear too large for words. He had offered water, ripped cloth, pointed the way back. Names were not exchanged. Gratitude was not witnessed. He left before the shaking stopped. At the time, it felt ordinary. Way truthfulness often does. He never believed such moments kept record. Never imagined the past could follow at a distance, patient, waiting for the proper evening, or that it might choose him when everything else had already been stripped away his certainty, his future, even the sound of his name spoken aloud. She arrived without noise, as if dusk itself had formed her. One moment the bench was empty beside him, the next it was not. She sat with a straight-backed, patient hands, eyes following the horizon rather than him. Her hair was stark, braided with care, her presence steady as a river stone. At 25, she carried a quiet authority that did not sick. Permission. The town noticed it immediately, though she offered it nothing. He felt the space between them shift, then settle like dust after wind, uneasy, but strangely balanced against weight of unsaid histories. He did not her name. She did not offer it. The air held them gently, inclusion patience. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and sure, shaped by listening more than declaring. She said she was here for him. No explanation felt, and none was demanded. Hestered at his boots, unsure whether toll or a stand. The words felt impossible and precise, like an error resting against his ribs. Something Old inside him stirred, cautious and afraid. It was not hope yet, only the loosening fear after years of being told to expect nothing from anyone. They sat together through the slow, dimming O-flight, words arriving like shy animals. She spoke of weather, of roads, of how evenings sounded different in the hills. He listened, surprised by the ease of it. No one rushed him. No one asked him to defend himself. Her presence asked gately that he remain. The town's whisper stickened as lanterns multiplied, suspicion moving faster than kindness. He felt it pressing in again, the familiar urge to retreat. To persevere, little remained before disappointment noticed, and claimed it for itself the way this town always seemed to do, eventually, inevitably. On third evening, she brought water and a folded blanket, offering both without ceremony. He accepted, embarrassed by gratitude rising too quickly. Their hands did not touch. Respect lived in the distance she kept. He noticed scars along her wrist, pale and deliberate histories she did not tell. Strength, who understood then, did not always harden people. Sometimes it taught them gentleness. The thought unsettled him. He had believed survival required armor. She seemed to have survived by remaining open in a world that rewarded cruelty and punished visible tenderness, especially for those born between borders and histories. He asked finally she had come. She looked at him ventrally, and something ancient passed between them. She spoke of a boy found bleeding years ago, guided home by a stranger who never waited for thanks, her brother. The word landed softly, heavily. Memory unfolded with sudden clarity, and his chest tightened. He had not known who he helped. She had never forgotten who he was. The bench felt smaller. The evening leaned closer, listening as if the land itself recognized. A debt returning, has swallowed, unsure. For years he risked himself. The town watched from shadow sand doorways, measuring what this meant. He felt old fear rise, warning him of consequences. She sat calmly, as if storms were familiar companions. He understood then that her presence was not chaste nor charity, but a reckoning lived gently. The past had reached him at last, wearing a human face. As lantern flickered, she leaned closer and murmured that she had been watching suns that day. He did not yet know what deed would cost him to listen, or whether the town would allow such listening to continue once morning arrived with judgment. The next morning, a wreath brittle and bright, sunlight cutting through dust like a blade that had waited all night to be drawn. The town woke with its usual reluctance, doors opening just enough to look without committing. He felt their eyes before he saw them. Curiosity sharpened, Bedisa prevail. She was not beside him now. The bench was empty, the blanket fold where he had left it. Her absence louder than any greeting he might have received. For the first time in years, the quiet felt unstable, as if it might tip and spill something he could not gather back up. He went about his day with borrowed purpose, repairing what did not need fixing, standing when no one stood with him. Words followed Jim in fragments. Apache, trouble, ode. Each one landed softly and stayed. By afternoon, a man stepped into his path broach, shouldered, smiling the way men do when they believe themselves unjuled. The man spoke of order and concentrance, of how peace depended one in one's place. He suggested the woman would leave soon enough. Pushed by pressure, the town applied, without omitting its hand. He advised the cowboy to remain grateful for invisibility. The advice tasted licorice. The cowboy said nothing, but something inside him shifted, a hinger loosening after years of being forshut. By evening she returned, walking open Lither's time, her chin lifted, her calm unmistakable. He felt relief and fear roved together. They sat again, though closer now, the distance between them short-ended by the morning's unease. Cha spoke of how watching over someone was not the same as guarding them. He understood she was offering him choice, not protection. The town gathered its courage behind windows and door frames. Someone laughed too loudly, someone else's path. The moment stretched, thin as glass. He told her then that it might be better if she did not come again. Few words fell badly, clumsy, and untrue. Hess spoke of danger, of how the town devoured what it could not name. He did not say he was afraid of losing the fragile steadiness she had given him. He did not say he had grown accustomed to being seen. She listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she nodded once as if whether she rose, gathered nothing, and walked away without turning back. The bench seemed suddenly enormous, a field after harvest, stripped and aching. Night deepened, and with it came the return of fevery doubt. He thought he had survived. He dreamed. Poorly, offences collapsing and hands slipping away. At dawn, Orator arrived with news that stirred old accusations, dragging his name back into public mouths. He stood in the saloon as voices rose around him, your self-restraint breaking loose. He felt the familiar urge to shrink, to accept version of himself they preferred. Then the room quieted. She stood in the doorway, dust on her hem, eyes steady. She crossed the floor beside him, not touching, simply present. She spoke calmly, telling Astri he never defended. Of a night when chose mercy over convenience, of a boy returned alive, of a family that remembered. Her words did not accuse or bug. They offered context, and context stirring the room. The man from Summerning shifted, uncertain. Others looked away. The weight he had carried loosened, not because he was forgiven, but because truth had finally been spoken aloud. He felt something like breath return to his lungs. Afterward, outside beneath a sky rinsed clean by stars, he apologized. Not grandly, honestly. She accepted without ceremony. He did not ask her to stay. He told her it would walk beside her if she chose. She smiled then, small and real, and said that was enough. In the weeks that followed, he learned the shape of her patience. It was not endless, but it was honest. She worked alongside him. When work appeared, shared meals when money did not, and listened without trying, taught her what time still needed to touch. He learned her name in the slow way one learns important things by earning the right to hold it. She learned his in written, not the one the town used, but one spoken by people who once loved him. They spoke of losses without alling them, of futures without mending certainty. Some evenings the town remained hostile, and some morning skinness surprised them both, small and awkward as a colt finding its legs. There were setbacks. A night when stones struck the door, a rumor that flared Andied. Each time he waited for her to disappear, and each time she remained, not defiant, simply rooted. He realized in that companionship was not a butruscu, but endurance. When he faltered, she did not carry him. She reminded him, standing still, was also a choice. Gradually, He stopped flinching at footsteps, stopped apologizing for existing. The past did not vanish. Beauty loosened its grip, allowing room for something gentler to grow, where bitterness once crowded everything else. On one quiet afternoon, he returned to Tough Bench alone, and noticed how different it felt. Not empty, not waiting. Simply wood and sun and memory. He understood then that places changed stone. People were brave inside them. Haress and walked toward home, carrying no proof of redemption, only its steady weight, the kind that does not bend and endure gossip or time. The night no longer frightened him. It had taught him that darkness could break, and when it did, something honest and enduring waited patiently on the other side. In team, they chose each other without announcement, building a future they tasked little of a town, and offer Redquia proof. He reclaimed dignity through consistency. She found rest without surrender. Their story ended not with applause, but with shared mourns, steady hands, and the simple certainty that they were no longer alone together in disguise that finally felt wider now. For